Hello folks, today we're going to talk about some leak specs for an unconfirmed new Lumix Panasonic camera. Well, kind of. We know that there are two cameras that are supposed to be released, which are one a new vlogging micro four third camera, or a new vlogging camera. We don't know if it's going to be micro four third or whatever, but that's what the news said, that it's going to be micro four third, and it's the successor of the Lumix G100. So let's see. But this is actually a rumor a bit weird, because we were supposed to receive the GH7, which in a previous video I just said that it's probably not possible that we're going to receive it. And this news looks and sounds like it's exactly what I told it was going to happen. So this is going to be most probably a full frame camera, because it's going to be the successor of the S1R, apparently. But there are some few things that makes me think that it's not going to be the successor of the S1R. But another camera still in the full frame lineup that not many people are actually talking about. But stick to this video, because later on I will talk more about what I mean about that. Let's go straight into the specs. So basically the S1R has a 60 megapixel sensor. Is basically the photography part of the full frame lineup, or the S series of Lumix cameras. So we have the S1H, which is the leading in the video specs in the full frame sensors, and then you have the S1R, which is the photography part. Then you have the S5, which is kinda the pro consumers lineup, and then you have the S1, which I never really understood where the S1 actually stands. But this new camera is going to have the same body as the S5 Mark II. So that looks that this body is basically going to be the body that Lumix is going to use for all of their cameras, except most probably the Pro or the Pro lineup, like the S1H. I just would have loved that the S5 Mark II X would have had the screen that the S1H had, or the GS6 has. It didn't happen. So who knows if basically the successor of the S1H will actually have the screen with this body. Who knows? But the S1R Mark II is going to keep basically the 60 megapixel sensor, which is going to be kind of a new developed lens sensor, because they're going to put the AF, the new hybrid detect autofocus, inside this camera. So they're just going to keep the same sensor, but with the AF, which it's amazing. It's a freaking 60 megapixel sensor. Can you complain about that? Nope. Then here is a little bit the weird part about this camera, since it's kinda supposed to be the flagship for the photography side of the S lineup. The specs are not that cool, that I don't even know how to say it, but 9 frames per second, 14-bit mechanical shutter burst. Nothing special. Canon does way better than that. Basically, that's double than that in mechanical. Sony the same. The weirdest part is even in an electronic mode. It has 15 megapixels, and it basically does 60 frames per second. Why would you put a 60 megapixel sensor inside a body, and to give us like 60 frames per second, we have to go down to 15 megapixels, which for social media is amazing. But if someone is using a 60 megapixel, is for something else. Because for social media, I can buy cameras that cost way less than probably what this camera will cost. So yeah, these specs don't make sense at all. But what they don't specify in this spec is if there is actually going to be an electronic shutter bust, a different one from this one, because they have 60 megapixels. So there might actually be 20 frames per second or a 30 frame per second with the entire readout of the sensor. So let's see. But this is the only rumors we have for this flagship photography S-series camera of Lumix. And here is where I'm going to talk about why I don't think it might not be the S1R Mark II, but instead the S1 Mark II. I never understood really where the S1 fit, because it kind of had features from the S5 and then from the S1H, but then it was kind of crippled in a weird way where you will have like the 6K, only I think 15 minutes, and then you have to stop recording and then start recording again, and so on. Then you to be able to record in B-raw, you had to like buy the licensing. Like the S1H2 had the same, but then they released the S5 where you didn't need to. So you understand where I'm going with this. So I think this is going to be just the S1, just because the video specs are amazing. It's not going to be the S1H Mark II because the videos are still kind of weird formats. But now I'm just going to go straight into it so you can understand what I'm saying. What basically the rumor wrote is that the full frame mode video has been improved compared to the S5 Mark II, which is to be expected. OpenGate 3x2, 4.8K up to 60 frames per second. That's cool. With the S5 Mark II and the S5 Mark II X, you actually have 6K, but not up to 6 frames per second. So is it kind of a downgrade of 4.8? Yes, but it's an upgrade because you have a slow motion, which is quite amazing. Then you have a 17:9, so basically cinema 4K, I believe, 4.8K up to 60 frames per second. Pretty good. So you have basically a 5K up to 60 frames per second, which the S5 Mark II X has maybe a bump more of resolution, but still don't have a slow motion in that 5K part. Then this is the most exciting part. It has 9.5K super sampling cinema, 8K up to 24 per second. Let me repeat it again. 9.5K super sampling cinema, 8K up to 24 per second. So, how freaking sharp that image is gonna be. And that's really, really exciting. There is nowhere to know if it's gonna have some recording limits or so on. This is what we have. Then we're gonna have 4.8K super sampling cinema 4K up to 96 frames per second. And then there's gonna be a cinema 4K up to 120, but it's gonna be cropped basically 1.16x. I don't know why would you put the crop there, but exactly because of this, I don't think it's basically the S1H Mark II, because it wouldn't make sense that you cripple that camera by putting a crop in the 120 frames per second, so in the super slow motion frame rate. Basically, you will cripple that camera and nobody will basically just come there and buy it, because you have Sony and you have now even the kind of lower end of Sony cameras having it too. So it doesn't make sense. So yeah, no, it's not gonna have. But then it's gonna have basically 16:9 modes in 17:9 high with crop horizontal pixels, which I think it's about the social media croppings and stuff like that. You will be able to do it in some way, doesn't matter, because you have anyway the 3x2 open gate, so all that stuff doesn't matter when you have an open gate. So yeah, basically this is the reason why I think this might be the S1 Mark II and not the S1R, just because it doesn't make sense, this crippling stuff that they put on the picture side, or basically this limiting basically amount of information we have for the photography side, and we have a lot of information on the video side, because that's where it looks like this Rumours was really like pushing this. So yeah, but it might be the S1R Mark II. I have no clue. But this is just a rumor, so you have to take this with a grain of salt. But we know that Lumix is going to be able to do that because they have already the sensor, the 60 megapixels. They just have to implement the autofocus inside it. So it's not anything impossible for them to do, as we know already. So what do you think about these rumors? Leave me a comment down below. Let's have a chat there. Let me know what you actually think this camera is going to be and what kind of thoughts you have. So take good care of yourself. I'm Sam. Consider subscribing if you like this type of content. There is more coming, and I'm going to see you in the next one.